good afternoon to you. It's Fellowship Day 215. Nice round number between the 5s and the 0s. It's a Friday again, and I'm coming to you this time probably about an hour and a half before the team and I head out for our festive lunch. I say that with some surprise because it's been a while since I've done that. Stories for another time, but well, it's the first time since lockdown that we've been able to get together in this sort of way. Of course, last year being 2020, it was just off the cards entirely. I was in a different line of work at the time. The year before that, I was looking at shutting down the first version of my lab a while before starting the present fellowship, the fellowship that's now brought this podcast about. A segue is always a detour that I never really expected. This is what happens when it's all non-scripted. Anyway, that's of use. That's maybe a little flag in the ground. I'll talk more about this fellowship versus previous positions I've had on another day. But today I wanted to check in on a theme that's pretty damn difficult to talk about without being an absolute horrendous hypocrite up front, and that is the topic of giving advice. I largely agree with the premise that unsolicited advice is advice that will never be heard or actioned. And if you look at anything I'm putting out online, there's a danger of this sounding hypocritical right away. I put out a lot of blogs on leadership. I'm putting out this podcast to, in an unscripted fashion, reflect on my attempts to grow as a leader. I put out sort of daily thoughts, in other words, little quotes of concise things that have come to mind in a given day. I try to put those out daily. I run a lot of seminars. I put out YouTube videos of those recordings. All of it comes together to make me, and I guess I am partly, look like a complete and utter tryhard. I love putting out this stuff. I like experimenting with all these different platforms and learning the skills of video and audio production. And yeah, as I've said before, I don't look at likes or many comments, but I do hope that at least one person out there is getting some value from it. But all of that together makes it look, on top of being a tryhard, like someone who's just passing out a lot of unsolicited advice. Be that as it partly may, then what I want you to consider today is the way in which I try to put that out. And it's a way that I want to highlight because it's something that you can bring into your own leadership if you find it valuable. And that is that wherever possible, notice that I try to use terms like consider this or have you thought about that. Less and less, and again I say I don't think I do this perfectly. You could probably cite some of these daily quotes I put out and say this is just directly unsolicited advice telling us to do one thing rather than another. But for the most part, what I try to do is to say, consider this, think about that, and put it in the form of a question, a provocation for you to think about it, to go away and assess what you currently do versus what you might. And perhaps in the most challenging sense, try to do that without it sounding like it's a leading question, where you ask it in such a way that you're really just seeding the answer that you already want. That is the best way I've found, the best way I've learned. I've been on various courses over my career and trying and failing various other methods. It's the best way I've found to offer advice without pushing it, to put thoughts in someone's head, to give them the space to creatively wrestle with an idea on their own and come to a solution, come to a realisation or a growth point for themselves. On previous days, I can't cite it off the top of my head. At least one occasion I've spoke about the difference between mentoring and coaching. And this point on advice, you can argue about it sort of bleeding more into the coaching than the mentoring side, where one of the main aims in coaching is not to steal the person's revelation, not to steal and catch the penny before it drops for that person. This way of saying advice in terms that you're asking someone to consider something rather than forcing it upon them. What you're doing is offering them the opportunity to think about something and come to a conclusion that maybe you don't even know what it should be or can be. But what you're doing is gifting someone with an opportunity to debate the way they currently see things. Whether or not they eventually agree with how you do it personally doesn't really matter. But with that sort of coaching hat on, what you're doing is offering someone the chance to come to their own revelation, to think about something, to wander down a thought path that they might never have considered. So that's where I'm at. I'm always trying to say what you might consider. And you'll have noticed, if you've listened to more than just this episode, that that's what I'm trying to do at the end of these meandering rambles of a given day. I'll ask you to consider something, to think about how you might bring a certain idea into your own path, into leadership, and however that may look for you. And so in a sort of hopelessly meta version today, I leave you to consider how you might give your advice without it being an unsolicited push. Hope you're having a great day. We're off to have a festive lunch. Have a great day. Thanks for being here as always, and I'll check in again soon with you for another episode of the Read Indeed podcast. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, head over to the website, where not only will you find the written blog versions of these podcasts, you'll find my leadership blog series, the Daily Thought series, and information about my book on managing the imposter phenomenon. We also have even more free resources and webinars linked to the YouTube channel. So head on over to dr-marc-reid.com. That's dr-marc with a C -reid.com. Thanks again for listening.